Hi, and welcome back to another episode of Project Stargate Fringe Research. I'm your host, Mark Brenner.
I'm She the Medium.
I'm co-host Greg Shipp.
And I am Bre, aka Thin Lizzy Borden.
We are so thankful to have you as a guest co-host this evening, Bre. Thank you so much for being with us.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me.
We're really, really honored to have you. Before we get into tonight's guest, I wanted to catch up with everybody. How's everything been going with you? How's the weather up there? Any crazy research you've been up to?
So everything's been good with me. Just very busy. We've been in this heat wave. I think it's a heat wave. And everything's been pretty steady. Thanks.
Right on. How about you, Greg?
I just got back from my student orientation at the local community college. Just met my instructors for this semester. I'll be doing cybersecurity. It was a fun time, and I enjoyed it, and was glad to be on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad you were able to make it tonight. By the way, guys, Jake is out celebrating his mother's birthday with her. He will not be with us this evening, but he will be with us next week. And then we have Miss Bre. We've interacted a lot over social media, and I've been quite a fan of yours when you were on Spaced Out Radio. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what kind of research you're into, and just tell us a little bit, our listeners, a little bit about yourself?
Yeah. Well, first off, I'm a witch, and where to start? My grandpa saw a UFO in the 80s, and so ever since then, it's kind of always been a topic of interest in my family. And so for UFOs, I've always been, interested. Paranormal, I've had more experiences in, firsthand experiences. So I think I'm well-rounded in both those fields. And then I do tarot reading as well.
Oh, wow. I don't know anything about tarot. You're gonna have to tell me about it sometime. Explain it to me. I just don't know anything about it.
It's fun stuff.
Yeah, it looks kind of interesting. I've just never fooled with it, or I don't know a whole lot about it. But at any rate, we're really glad to have you tonight. And I know, talking with you and your husband recently, I'm looking forward to having you guys on and talk about all your spooky woo.
Yeah.
But anyway, tonight on Project Stargate Fringe Research, we have Profiling the Paranormal Part 2 with Dr. Bre Taff. Dr. Taff is going to come back. We're going to bring him on in here in just a moment. But we're going to go further into his book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below, Explorations of the Unknown. And for those of you who aren't familiar with Dr. Taff, he has a PhD in biomedical engineering, and he's a parapsychologist. He wrote that book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. It's one of the best books on the paranormal that I have ever read in my life. It's so good. But anyway, without further ado, I say we go ahead and bring on our guest. I say I'm ready for a great conversation. Let's see here. All right. There we go. He'll be on here in just a moment.
Hello.
Hi, Dr. Taff. Welcome back to Project Stargate Fringe Research. How are you, sir?
That was great. Everyone's online. Everyone's on.
Yes, sir. We're hot now.
Okay.
Thank you for being with us again.
My pleasure.
I want to start off with I know you've gone through your story a million times, but for our listeners and some of our new co-hosts that aren't as familiar with you, could you tell us a little bit about, give us a quick rundown on your how
Right.
you got into parapsychology
Okay.
and why?
Now, before I get into that, there's something else I have to speak about. You know, when people get into this seriously, like I have, dedicated almost my entire adult life to it, they don't really think about the repercussions, ramifications, the fallout for when you're doing this stuff academically and professionally versus just someone in their spare time running around and investigating things. I'll explain what happened. About 9 years ago, okay, I own 6 patented medical devices. I won't bore the listeners with what they are. That's not what we're here for. But we wrote a business plan, which we thought was quite good. And some friends, we got it to the people in charge of product development for a major international company. They do everything from spacecraft to car engines to electronics, everything. So the guy read it, and he loved it. It was fantastic. So he wrote up a wonderful review and passed it upstairs to people that make decisions. And he was a VP of development. So we're waiting. Weeks go by, months go by. What the hell's going on? So I do some inquiry, and I'm able to talk to one of the people upstairs. Now, this is not in America. This is in Europe. And the multinational corporation, but they're huge. So I said, look, I'm curious whether if people read our business plan and you give me some feedback on your response. And he said, okay. And look, oh, yeah, well, we read it. Yeah. She said, it's a bunch of crap. There's no evidence you've done any clinical research at all. And the patents are indecipherable. I thought, what?
Wow.
And so he's going on and on. I said, sir, tell me the truth. What happened? And then a long pause. I thought he hung up. Are you there? Are you there? And he said, yeah, I'm here. Very negative in his tonality, very condescending. Yeah, okay, I'll tell you the truth. I looked you up. You're crazy. You're running around chasing the paranormal things. You're psychic. Investigate this, investigate that. And you're crazy. And that's why no one's ever going to help you because you're nuts. And when I found out who you were, I threw your business plan in the garbage, which is where it belongs.
Wow, that's horrible.
And this is very common. And, the reason I got into this field is twofold. One is just curiosity. But also that I was having very frequent paranormal encounters, experiences, not encounters, telepathic, clairvoyant, precognitive, out of body. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. Everyone's having these things. They're not talking about it. Then I learned they weren't having these types of experiences. And it got to the point where, it got me in trouble when I was young. In grammar school, you're 10 years old in the 5th grade. So this has been told a million times, but it's important. I get significant because it shows what was going to happen in the future. So we're playing at recess, warm day, and this little girl named Christine, who I knew but didn't know her well, is walking towards me, and she's wearing a sky blue dress, and on the top there was a large sunflower design. Okay, so she's walking towards me, and this other vision I have, I don't know what called X-ray vision, popped on, and I went, what's that? I could see that under her dress there was a plastic bag and a tube going into her body. I'm 10 years old. I didn't know anything about medicine. And I went up to her and said, what's that bag under your dress and tube? And she started screaming. She ran in and got the teacher. He dragged me in the principal's office. The principal, a man, he said, so what did you do? Did you sneak in the girl's bathroom, or did you just look under her dress? I said, I didn't either. Then how could you know she had a colostomy? And I said, what's a colostomy? I'm 10 years old, And so he said, you're in trouble, mister. I can have you arrested and, suspended, if not, thrown out of school permanently, go to juvenile hall. I'm going to call your mother. So I called my mother, And my mother says to him, yeah, Barry can do that. And the principal went, what? Barry could, what do you mean, do what? He can look through things. And he said, sure, as crazy as your effing son. He hung up on my mother. And then he said, listen, Barry, I'm going to tell you this one more time. If this happens again, I'll have you arrested, go to juvenile hall, and you'll be expelled from school. Well, so then I'm looking at him, and I said, you've got that appendix scar, the appendectomy. That would be called a keloid. I didn't know that word. And he turned purple and red on me. He goes, get out, get out. So I got out. And it did happen again. I never spoke of it. I didn't feel like going to jail or being arrested. Now, they would go to junior high, and the ability came stronger. Not only did it happen spontaneously, but some other elements of it were more dramatic and seeing things. So there was a girl named Helene in junior high, a little taller than me, but everybody was taller than me. Auburn hair, blue-green eyes. I knew nothing about her. Every time she got near me, even if I didn't know she was near me, I would pass out.
Dang.
And what a surprise, she was epileptic. This has happened with other people I met over time. Near people who are epileptic, I get dizzy and I start to pass out. That's what my body's dealing with it. And it's, for people that have to understand, if tomorrow you woke up and you were superhuman in some area, and would you had abilities that your friends and family didn't have, would you tell them about it? Would you demonstrate it to show off, or would you just keep your mouth shut? I was of the prior. I was showing it, look what I can do. And first people think you're crazy, but then when you demonstrate what you can do, they don't think you're nuts. They think you're dangerous. And so you're looked at very differently than other people. Our society, it looks up to people that are unique. If you're an athlete, if you're a famous doctor, a lawyer, God forbid a lawyer, an actor, a producer, a director, an industrialist who's made like, Elon Musk or whatever. People look up to, look what they've done. Wow, they're worth billions, and look all the things they've contributed to society. That's fine. But if the way you're different from other people is not consistent with people looking up to you, people walk away from you because they're frightened. They're scared because they don't know what you're going to do, what you're going to say. Late teens, I knew that a woman by the name of Dr. Thelma Moss was doing paranormal, parapsychological research at UCLA. So I wrote her a letter. She didn't respond. Wrote her another letter. She didn't respond. And then I left a message on the switchboard. There was no email back then. And this is in 1968 and early 69. And I just gave up. I assumed, I called her, no response. And then a few weeks later, I bumped into a graduate student in college who was working with her. And so an appointment was set up. I went to her home in Beverly Hills, very close to where my parents lived, like about 5 minutes away. And I'm talking to her, telling her what I can do. And she says, can you psychometrize things? Yeah. You hold objects, you get impressions. Okay. She throws me her keychain. Now, the only thing I knew about her was that she's an academician, she's a psychologist, and she's doing research in the paranormal. Other than that, I knew nothing about her at all. So I threw out a few names. One was her son. Another, I think, was her daughter, but I'm not sure. But then I said, I see a fat, blue-eyed blonde woman screaming all the time named Shelley. Is that relevant to you? That was her best friend, the actress Shelley Winters.
Wow.
So that worked, albeit not too flattering. But I knew nothing about her background. That long before she became had her doctorate, got her doctorate, worked at UCLA, she was an actress and a writer. She co-wrote a movie in the late 50s called Colossus of New York with Ross Martin and some others. It was actually quite a good movie for the era, for that genre in that time. It was very well made, and there were elements of the paranormal involved with it. So it was quite interesting, and it's worth watching. Even today, it's black and white, And Otto Kruger was in it as well. Mala Powers was in it. Anyway, so they started, Dr. Moss wanted to do a study on me. Okay, sure, no problem. So we did a study, and okay, so the results were published in a medical journal years later, and everything was good, but the one aspect of the study that the journal refused to publish, and that was the neurophysiological data they collected regarding me, because they said no one could live with this level of extreme level of brainwave activity. You'd be in seizure constantly, or you'd already be dead of a massive attack. Ever had a attack? No. Are you seizure prone? No. Are you epileptic? No. But at 10 hertz, 10 cycles per second, I was generating 1,000 microvolts, which is about 100 times over what's normal.
Jeez.
Wow. And yet, so okay, so the journal was published in assumed that there were some artifacts, the machines were broken. So Dr. Moss and her associates ran the EEG in several different labs in the medical center, and the results were pretty much the same across the board. I could sit there with my eyes open, talking as I am now, and it would generate 1,000 microvolts at about 10 hertz, which when you sitting up and talking and watching things with your eyes, you usually go over 15 to 20, maybe 30 hertz beta activity. I was in the alpha range. Okay, so I became a research subject, and then I became a research assistant there. Now, there were two things I was interested in. One was ESP, because that was what happened to me growing up. And my idea was simple. Could you take a normal, healthy, emotionally stable person who's never had paranormal experiences? Could you train them to be psychic? Could you enhance whatever inherent ability they had? And on my website, barrytaff.net, there's a lengthy article that I think is worth reading called Learned Psi, Training to be Psychic. And it gets into part of what we did. And the results were way beyond what I expected. I thought if we had success, we'd be lucky. But it was better than success. Now, we didn't know this, but through Dr. Moss, interesting people were showing up at my research groups. And why they were so interesting, CIA people, NSA, DARPA, ONI,
the whole gang.
all this. Yeah, not at once, but and they were all wearing civilian clothes, so I didn't know who the people were. And I remember one time a guy was there, and he gave us a target, and it's a sensory-deprived environment. And I remember what I was saying. I said, I keep seeing a strange submarine that's really big. It's got all these missiles in it. Something the name Trident or something, or a D2 or a D. So he freaked out, and he said, you have to surrender the audio tape. Why? Because you have described information. It's classified. They were developing the Ohio class sub with the Trident missile, but it hadn't become public yet. So I gave up the tape, big deal. But the thing is, in this group, some amazing things happened. Primarily that it changed the notion of the way, what we call phenomena. So if we see something from the past, that's called retrocognition. If we perceive events from the future, that's called precognition. If you see things from a distance through another mind, that's telepathy. If you see it without another mind intervening, just on your own, that would be clairvoyance. There's other elements, but but the bottom line with all this, that it's all remotely accessed information. We're able to perceive things that are non-localized to us. And the question is why some of us can do it, why others can't. And the question is, another example. In 2013, he's a colleague of mine, he's an MD. We've known each other. He was volunteering in the lab. Anyway, so he was going to be in town. He'd bring by his new girlfriend and her kids. He wanted me to diagnose them. Okay. So I show up. His girlfriend was really attractive. She looked like the last wife of Tom Cruise, very similar look. And she had 2 kids. The son was a really cute little guy, and her daughter was quite striking. So they wanted me to start with the son. And he was sitting there, and I'm looking at him, and it was the strangest thing I'd ever seen in my life. The best way to describe it was the frontal lobes in his head were missing. There was nothing there. And I go, what's that? Well, he had cortical encephalitis, so his frontal lobes were eaten away by diseases. And of course, my friend didn't tell me that, and his girlfriend didn't tell me that. So she kind of freaked out. How could I do that? Then I looked at her. I said, well, your lungs look like old brown paper bags with black spots in them. You have COPD? And she nodded her head, and she jumped up, grabbed her kids, and left my place, assuming that my friend told me about her and her kids, which he did not. So, but see, this ability I have sometimes helps, but other times it's troublesome. The last real girlfriend I had some years ago, we're together, and I get, look, I can't date you anymore. Why? Well, you're really sick, and you don't know it yet. She goes, what? Well, what's wrong? Well, you have a prolapsed mitral valve. You have endometriosis. And this. She goes, what? How do you know that? I said, I'm just telling you, the early onset of menopause. And she had it and didn't know it. So, yeah, checked it out. That was that. Another incident in 1998. Old girlfriend popped up. I hadn't seen her in 15 years. Looked great. No lines or wrinkles, no fat. Looked fantastic. So we're outside, very warm. She's wearing a halter top. And I approached him with Linda. And I approached her and I said, what's that stuff all over your chest? She goes, it looks like a giant jellyfish on top of you. Well, it wasn't on her, it was in her. I said, you better go to an oncologist, have some mammograms. She did. She had to have a double mastectomy and reconstructive surgery.
Wow.
But how can you do this? I go, I don't know how. I just do it. But this is the problem when one can do something that can't be rationally explained or, well, the problem is that the reason parapsychology has never really gone anywhere in a literal sense is because there's no comprehensive theory that can explain how the phenomena work, because some of them violate what we supposedly know about the reality we live in. And this is the problem. Science doesn't like things it can't explain. They kind of want to forget it because it's too problematic or it's too uncomfortable to deal with. What if you could see the future and you learn that the future is as immutable as the past is? Then what? What do you do? We don't know. There's nothing to do. And this is the problem, is that, we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. There's enough data today where we could use medical procedures in a closed clinical environment and get some incredible answers. But the doctors doing it would lose their job and be fined and ostracized, and so nothing happens. People ask me, how did I come to develop the medical devices that I patented with my colleague? And I said, I don't know, well, maybe are you mimicking what you can do? I said, no, I don't think so. I mean, there's no evidence to indicate that. But the last thing about this is interesting. In 93 or 4, I developed a fever of unknown origin. Every test known to science was on everything. Imaging, blood work, but I couldn't find anything wrong. So on one of our instruments that I had at the time, I said, I'll run myself up. Now there's a point you can touch on the body that correlate to the mouth in terms of getting measurements. And I'll try that because everything else looked normal. And I did that, and the instrument lit up like a Christmas tree. It's a device which measures bilateral asymmetry or symmetry from biopotential. So I ran it up. I went, whoa, ran it up again. Whoa, okay. So I went to an oral surgeon in Beverly Hills, a few blocks from where I lived. And what a surprise. I had bilateral mandibular cysts. Had I not found them, I could have lost my jaw. Jeez. They were removed. So the question, does the machine work? Yep, it saved my life. And this is the problem, that people don't like dealing with things they don't understand because they have all these negative thoughts. And one other thing, everything I expected to learn when I got into this field turned out to be untrue. Things I never thought about turned out to be correct. And we get into some of the field work instead of the lab work, get into the field work of the parapsychology. It gets even stranger. But one last story before I forget it. We're doing the remote viewing group, the training at UCLA. This is discussed on my website. And so let's do precognitive. We've never tried that. We can do the real-time stuff. It was easy. So, okay. So we then lowered the lights and sensory deprivation, described the randomly chosen target of the next group a week from today. Okay, simple thing to do, right? Supposedly. So lights are out. We're verbalizing what we see. We were talking about a beautiful 3-story home in the Hollywood Hills. We were talking about a beautiful blue-eyed blonde girl, about 5'10", but looked like a model, just striking. We described how a baby grand piano in the house, which was played, and then we described a tall man, 6'4", 6'5", dark hair, dark eyes, all black shirt, black pants, black glove, black boots, black suit, black cape, black hat, black mask, and with an imposing sword. I'm like, what the hell is this? We thought so it's on the tape. So the next week, first session, new people came in that had never been there, did not know what we did in the last session. Each new person was given a sealed envelope with a piece of paper and a number inscribed on it. So we sit down, everyone sits. The only chair they can't sit in was my chair because I had the controls of the recorder and the lights. So we start back it up. The news. It's a week later. New people come in, and we say, open your packet. No, we rolled the dice. Okay, and I forgot what number came up. And when people open their packets, and this girl says, "Oh, that's my number." Okay, so we gave her the control for the machine, and she started hearing us talk about it. Well, her description of her was perfect, like she was already in the room. Face, her hair, her clothes, her eyes. She sat in the one chair in the room we sat. Each chair had a number under it that you could see without flipping it over. She sat in that chair of her own volition. Okay, and then let's see, she grew up in a 3-star home in the Hollywood Hills. They had a baby grand piano. And got to the point about the tall man all in black.
Wow.
She said to me, "How do you know me?" And I go, "What? Well, how do you know who I am?" I said, "I don't know who you are." "You don't know?" She said, "I'm Tony Williams." I go, "And?"
Oh.
"My father is Guy Williams. He played Zorro for Disney."
Wow.
And she said, and then she said, "I don't wait. You did this a week ago, and you randomly chose." I said, "Exactly. The probability of this being chance is astronomical." And so, if there was anything that strongly suggested that part of the future, if not all of it, is already there, this is it. I mean, we could have said anything. We could have described a short, fat lady. Could have described a 90-year-old man. I don't get it. I was come here by third parties, given a thing with a number. You pull the number. I don't get it. That's the point. We don't get it. How can you see the future if it's not already there? Theoretically, you can't, but we do occasionally. So she was a little unnerved about this, which I can explain. And weeks later, we tried the same thing again, precognition. So we're doing it, and all we kept seeing was fire, fire, fire. We're losing our mind. So the session ends, go back up to the lab the next morning, and I'm in there, and all these fire engines are coming to the building that we worked in. That room caught fire. One of the sockets behind the drapes sputtered, shorted out, and it caught the curtain or drapes on fire.
Wow.
But we didn't create the fire. No wonder why we saw it. It was imminent. It was the next thing that was going to happen there. And so, there were other things like this, which you discussed on my website in that article I mentioned. But this is just the tip of the iceberg. the really amazing thing was what we learned about poltergeist activity. Well beyond anything I've ever heard about or talked about. It's so amazing that it's shocking in a literal sense.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's what brings us up to where we are. I talked enough about what I've done. I want to talk about whatever.
Yeah. Before we get to the end of the first hour, I'd like to do some Q&A
Sure.
as a group. And I want and ladies go first. Bree, why don't you kick it off for us, and then you can follow, and then y'all can Greg, you can follow after her.
Yeah, one question I had. You were saying that you had your gifts at an early age, but then during high school, it kind of became more powerful. Do you think that puberty can be contributed to that? Because I do know that certain paranormal things can be attributed to kind of timeline when people are hitting that puberty.
Well, anything that Eddie, it's a very good question, and it's not totally answerable. Anything that alters the human neurochemistry can affect this ability. So if you're sick, if you're overly healthy, if you eat the wrong or the right foods too much, the course of it started when I was really young, and many more stories, but the whole point of it is my parents didn't have it. My grandparents didn't have it. I only met a few people in my life that are similar to me. I met a lot of weird people who make me look normal. But okay, in 87, I was taken to meet some psychic in Long Beach. I don't know who forgot her name. By two women that were taken by class. So women were about 30 years older, 20 years older than me. Okay, so we go down there. She didn't know who I was. I hadn't been on TV enough yet for her to know me. And she assuredly didn't read research journals. And so I sit down and she says, "Oh, you're here? You're not supposed to be here." I said, "What time should we come back?" "No, you don't get it. You're not supposed to be here." And I went, "What?" "No, you don't get it, sir. You're not supposed to be here now." "Okay, tell me when I'll..." "No, you don't get it. You're not supposed to be here on Earth." I went, "What? What are you talking about?" She goes, "You have problems with machines and energy." And yeah, well, the reason is because you're not supposed to be here. An example, the place I'm living in now, 2 mornings ago, I get up and I'm at the computer. Everybody would shower jet. And suddenly the fire alarm goes off where I am. And real loud. And the whole building went crazy. All the lights in the hallway outside my place went out. And there was no fire, but it's odd that it all happened here. They also keep having plumbing that fails around where I'm living. It seems, well, as we know, electromagnetic energy and water don't get along that well. So this is happening. It's sort of like, again, if you woke up tomorrow and you were superhuman in a way, what do you do with it? Do you help people? You show off like some crazy kid? And as I've gotten older, there are elements of it I can't control, but there are elements I cannot. I can't. If I'm near really sick people, I can read them like I'm reading a book. Mm-hmm. And invariably, what happens when you do this, they challenge you. You do it, they kind of stiffen up vertically and they move back from where they're sitting, away from me. I met a producer several years ago, came out, they wanted to do a TV series about my research. Not about me, but about the research. So he wanted me to diagnose him, it's no big deal, and his new wife. So I said, I described what was wrong with him, and I was right, big deal. And then I looked at her and said, "Oh, you have a broken clavicle," which of course she had. "How did you know that?" I said, "You're sitting in front of me." He never came back, nor did she. And their desire to work with me disappeared because they thought it was just fun and games, kind of crazy stuff, and now it's real. So these abilities, I think, exist in everyone, but for some reason, some people, if they're able to focus on what they're doing or deal with it in a practical manner, it works with them. That's, as far as hormonal fluctuations, yeah. However, the single greatest somatic correlation that's been demonstrated in my work and some others is that the majority, if not all, poltergeist agents are either seizure prone or epileptic. However, the majority of people who are seizure prone or epileptic are not poltergeist agents. There is a missing or unknown variable right in the middle, and no one knows what that is, but it's so consistent you could bet on this and you'd win every time. And that's the focus of it there. On my website, I talk about something called inductive resonance coupling, and there's some other elements that are. It's physics that instruments we take out to measure the environment. Measuring electric fields is really easy. Measuring magnetic field is very hard because it's extremely weak. So if you go up and try to measure a person with it, nothing's going to show up. However, if the person is epileptic or seizure prone, if they're a poltergeist agent, the instrument will measure them because they're putting out a magnetic field millions of times over that of a normal person.
Really quick, could you explain what a poltergeist agent is for everyone?
Okay.
Really quick.
Poltergeist. Okay. The word poltergeist is a German word meaning noisy spirit. Okay, but that's what the ancients thought that, and even more than a century ago, people thought that. Now, this is a manifestation of what's called recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis, meaning it's not the micro active, it's the hyperactive, it's the large end of it. And this stuff can furniture be thrown around, bounced around, objects being moved, things appearing and disappearing, strange noises don't make any sense. This is the macroscopic psychokinesis, meaning it's significant. The microscopic type is one you could learn to do in some cases. You can affect random event generators or blah, 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 or machines. I can't wear a watch. I've had some junky watches when I was young. I've had really high-end watches. None of them work. They all fail. And why? Because they become magnetized, even though the stainless steel case is made of metal that is not able to be turned into a magnet. But it was. So I've given up the notion of wearing a watch because why waste my money? And this is the same thing with cars. Screw up like ignition systems, batteries. But see, this is the thing. At my age, there shouldn't be any poltergeist activity around me because I'm too old. But that's what we think. When I lived with a friend first in Rancho Mirage, 2017. So I'm there. He's off playing pool. I'm watching TV. So I'm alone in the house. No one's there but me. I'm watching TV and I hear a woman to my right there was no one there go, Barry, and I jump off the couch because there was no one there.
Yeah.
It evolved to more disembodied voices, machines turning on and off. Okay, we then moved because he wanted a bigger place. So we moved from there to Palm Desert. Beautiful place, quieter, more relaxed. Well, nothing will happen here. Wrong. Instead of taking only 5 days to happen, this started happening in 5 months. Apparitions, luminous anomalies, water pipes bursting for no apparent reason, machines keep turning on and turning on. It was a joke. Light showing up when there's no source of light. And then I thought, well, why is it happening around my friend and me where it doesn't happen when I'm alone? Well, turned out we discovered that he is seizure prone. What a surprise. So again, how many coincidences make a fact? The woman, the friend, is asked the question about hormonal elements of going to puberty. Yeah, it changes our body dramatically, both in men and women, and that can have dramatic effects on stress levels, on behavior, on perception. It's like everything from your breathing to your hearing to your skin type, how sensitive your skin is to things. And the more we learn, the stranger it gets. Because in the end, there's no real theory for explaining a lot of this, which is why science hopes it'll just go away.
Well, that was a good question, Bree. Did you have anything else for him?
Um, no, just that I think that gift is amazing. I'm claustrophobic and I need to have an MRI, and I've been putting it off for a while. So if you had, if you knew someone, and I have chronic pain, I have endometriosis. So kind of what you said that your ex-partner had.
Right.
So if for someone that has chronic illness, I view that as an asset. Now I can see how other people, it's new, it's different, it's weird, they turn off. But I like the weird. I like being different. That's and that's who I gravitate towards.
Yeah.
But I think your gifts are amazing, and that's all I kind of questions I had at the moment.
When I was in graduate school, 1973, UCLA, I met a girl there named Carol. Beautiful, looked like a short, young Shirley MacLaine with dark hair, very exotic, but shorter than her, thankfully, because she's about 5'9". So we met, we started dating. We're talking once, and I'm looking at her. I said, "Oh, you've got a tumor," and I pointed to where it was on her right breast. And she went, "What? What's a tumor? How do you?" I go, "Don't worry, it's benign." "How do you know?" "I don't see calcium around it." So she got her degree shortly thereafter. Then she applied for a job and got one with IBM. Okay, so they had to run up physical, medical workups for insurance purposes. They did, and they found a lump in her right breast where I said it was. It was benign, but they took it out anyway, which is good. And she said, "I can't be around you." What? She goes, "I feel like a piece of glass around you. I have no privacy." And this is the problem. It's fun and games to a point. And then after that, it's like, people would rather not know because it's unnerving. And it's one thing, like there's a good friend of mine, he's a writer, producer, and so I've known him for decades. So I met his wife a long time ago. I was at their wedding, and she wanted me to diagnose her, and I did. It was easy because she had some problems. She every time I came over after that, we had parties there. She would make sure that she was not in the room with me. She was frightened of me. It's then it was set up by, I don't know if you remember who Jose Escamilla was. The Rods. Anyway, he used to be a casting agent. And to him, I met a girlfriend in 1983, and named Jody. She looked very much like one of the girls who starred in the old TV series called V, the dark-haired alien.
Great show. Love that show.
Yeah. So, and we were dating. And so before we were dating, we met for dinner. And we're eating. And he said, "Oh, your friend said you're psychic. What can you do?" I said, "I could diagnose you." She goes, "Yeah, okay, go ahead." So I said, "Well, you have a follicular cyst left over. You have some lower GI problems, and you have endometriosis." She goes, "What?" And she wrote it down, and it went to her OBGYN. Turned out I was right. So she gave the doctor my number. The doctor said, "Did you give her an examination?" "Not as you would understand, no. I just looked at her." But
Well, to be diagnosed with endo, you have to have laparoscopic surgery.
Yeah, I know.
So for that doctor should have been able to see if she had any,
Oh no, he checked her out. Everything I said was correct. So it turned out she didn't know it. This has happened so often in my life. And then years ago, my mom said to me, this decades ago, "What's wrong with your dad?" And I said to her, "Is it visibly discernible?" And she said, "No." Sat down on the couch next to him. They said, "You have a hiatal hernia." And I was right. My mother said, "You guessed." I only said one thing. I didn't say 10 or 20. I said one thing, and it was correct. And then about 14 years ago, I ran my father up in my device, and it showed there was significant cardiovascular problems. Go to cardiologist and have some, evaluation. He goes, no, I'm fine. I said, I'm telling you, go see a cardiologist. Oh, I'm fine. So he was picking up some tickets with relatives of ours downtown, and he collapsed. Had a heart attack. Was in the hospital. Had a aortic valve replacement.
Wow.
And the girlfriend from '93 with the prolapsed mitral valve. How do you know that? I said, well, I can see it, but I can also feel it. She said, what do you mean you feel it? When I'm around you, I feel like my heart's all screwed up, like I'm having trouble breathing and walking. And so, see, it's interesting to people, but they reach a point where they go, it's too much. I don't want to deal with it. Once in a blue moon, fine, but not something they want to be around because they can't control it. Now, in lieu of all this, another thing we discovered is that it's not that it's been reported before that people go out to investigate a haunting or a poltergeist case, or both, or whatever, and they come home and phenomena starts happening around them. Well, there's no entity following them home. A little more complicated. The evidence suggests now that if you're sensitive to these types of these energies, and God knows what's made, that they will in some way alter you. The same way, let's say you're really healthy. So you're at home with your wife and your kids, everything's great. You didn't go visit another family. The kids are sick, but they're in the back. They don't come out. So you're there. You don't eat or touch anything. You leave in an hour, come back home. You get sick. You give it to your kids. We know what that is. It's a vectored pathogen. Now, I think the same thing's happening in some aspects of paranormal. If basically, if you're susceptible, you go into these highly charged environments, it alters you in a way we wouldn't yet understand. It affects your biomagnetic field through inductive resonance coupling with your nervous system. You then go away and it bleeds off of you until it stops.
Let's get real quick to another question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
We're coming up on the end of the hour. Go. You have the floor. Go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things. So I identify with being able to sense sicknesses or different things on people, but I normally I smell them. I can smell a sickness on somebody.
Right.
And the other thing is that I wanted to ask you about the movie The Entity. I know you technically advised. What was that?
Yeah. If I sneezed, that was as far as it got. Joke. Anyway, go ahead.
What was it like working that case? I remember seeing that movie when I was young. And
the case began. The case began on, I think it was August 22nd, 1974. What happened a few days earlier, my colleague at the time, Terry Gaynor, was in a bookshop in Westwood, Hunter's Books, and he's talking about our work. And then the next aisle was a woman named Doris Byther with one of her friends. She hears Carrie talking, and she says, excuse me, my house is haunted. So rather than go into a lengthy conversation there, he got her number. And we went out, we called her, we set up a time to meet with her, we came out and talked with her. And the very first thing she said, I've been repeatedly raped by ghosts. And we're going, oh my God, this woman's psychotic. We rolled our eyes back. Look, there's really nothing we could do. We think you should see a psychiatrist, which is what you need in parapsychology. So we left. And then he called us back about 10 days later. Friends have been over, things happened. Okay. So we come back, and the house, as it did the first visit, had a horrible stench to it, like decomposing organic flesh, like a dead person floating around somewhere, and a strong sense of urine. Now, she was, I don't know how old she was. I know she was at least 10 years older than me. She would not give us her age. She was very cryptic about her answering our questions. She was a little, not my height, maybe an inch taller than me. Brown hair, blue-green eyes, kind of waif-like, very whatever. And she claimed there were three entities. There were two smaller ones that would hold her down. There was the big one that would actually rape her. And we couldn't prove or disprove that. But we came back next time, and we saw light zipping around her bedroom, but there was no source. And we began to do more work there. Now, this is in my book, Aliens Above, Ghosts Below. Chapter 2 is the real entity case. It goes to great depth on what happened and what my theories of it are. I do not for one microsecond believe that she was being raped by discarnate intelligence. What I do believe, and what the evidence suggested, is that she was a poltergeist agent. And now it's interesting. She had 4 children. The youngest is a very young daughter whom we never met, which is no big deal. And she got 3 boys, 2 smaller, younger ones, 1 bigger, strong one in her higher teens. And a little odd from a psychoanalytic standpoint. So my guess is that what we saw, what she was experiencing, was a psychokinetic manifestation of her own libido. In other words, something was happening all right, and it was to her.
Wow,
I don't think it was dead people. It was an extension of her 3 sons. And it was, we were there one point, and we saw these lights, but got a picture of one. It's in my book and on my website. It looks like a comet with a tail on it. There was no reference, though. We couldn't tell where it was coming from, going to nor could you determine its speed. So we had several professional photographers working on this with SLR cameras. And with Tri-X black and white film, because in that day, that time, it was great for recording low light images. So we got the tail, or comet tail, and then one point we're in the bedroom and lights are flying all around her, like a show, like a laser show from the Laserium up in the River Park Observatory. But there was no source of the lights. The lights were always lime green in color, always. And at one point, they coalesced in the corner where her little bed was, in her bedroom, and they formed the apparition of a very tall man, probably well over 6.5 feet. You could see the head, the brow ridge, the jaw, the neck, the upper torso, the pectoral, the shoulders, the going down to about the rib cage, and it was articulating, and it moved. It wasn't just static. No, you couldn't see eyes, but very deep socketed below the brow ridge. And then suddenly, poof, like light going out. It's gone. So we had all these people firing cameras. What we captured was not what we saw. What we captured over Doris Bither was an incredibly bizarre, enigmatic, luminous arc that framed her. Now, to show you the insanity of skeptics, earlier this year, the journal called The Skeptical Inquirer published 2 articles on the Henry case. And they basically accused Carrie Gaynor and myself of fraud, that we faked the whole thing so we could get money to make a movie, so everything was a lie. And the extraordinary arcs we photographed, 2 sets of them, one with her in frame, one without, were actually hair follicles in front of the camera. Right. So they wanted me to come on their show. I said, don't waste my time. I would have ripped them to pieces. I would have said, well, you guys weren't alive when this happened, were you? So you couldn't have been there. You couldn't have seen what happened. So why are you accusing us of fraud if you weren't there? But what are you, godlike? Are you prescient? No. And I just would have ripped them apart. So I thought, you do whatever. Who cares what they say? We were there. They weren't. You can't change. You can't rewrite history. It's that simple. But now the case didn't end there. A fuse box was torn out of the wall and thrown at her. Another night, now we put up on her bedroom walls and ceiling black poster boards, and each poster board had a number on it and a magnetic orientation. So if we captured more pictures, we'd know where it started, where it moved to, hopefully speed at which it moved, then direction, the reference grid. And when we're there, lights are zipping around, and suddenly Terry is eggy whatever it is on, and suddenly something rips off the gaffer's tape, the duct tape, on one of the boards. It flies across the room, hits Doris in the head. Didn't hurt her, but come on, there were 26 people in that little bedroom, and it only hit her. And then Carrie asked to do it again. A few more were torn off, as if by unseen hand, flew across the room, but just landed about a foot away from her. But how did that happen? So eventually, she moved from Culver City to Carson. The only way we found her was that Frank D. Fellita, who wrote the novel The Entity, had followed her. She was very she was very reluctant to give us a lot of the information we asked for. If this happened today, I just would have walked out and said, "I'm sorry, but we can't help you anymore." But she did talk to Frank DiFelitta. He was much older than us. Now, when the case started, I was 25, and Frank was probably in his 40s. So I suspect Doris was in her 30s, somewhere in her mid to late 30s. I don't know. We knew the age of her kids, but not of her. And, so she moved from Culver City to Carson. The phenomena followed her there. What a shock. We go there, stuff happened. It's on my website, in my book, mostly in my book. And, okay, so we see there's a vase in the middle of the room, flies across the room, slams in the middle of the floor of all of us. But there was nothing we could see moving it. Went to the original house. Carrie Gaynor was in the kitchen with her. The lower cupboard door flew open in the kitchen, and then the skillet came flying out, landed a few feet away. So, ongoing. And then she died, I think, in the late 90s. But the cause of death was listed as a cardiopulmonary arrest. But what made her heart and lungs stop? They didn't know. Does this prove it was paranormal? No, probably. If we had said to her, "Look, we want to run up some medical things on you, like a EEG and some imaging to see if you're seizure prone or epileptic," she would have said, "No, don't bother me. Get away from me." Mm-hmm. So, that's a long time ago. And then she moved from Carson to San Bernardino or Riverside. And then she came back to L.A. when we screened the movie. I didn't like the movie because they hired the director at the last minute. And his photography was okay, his shooting. But it's just he rewrote the script and dramatically weakened it. But remember, the book was a novel. It wasn't a documentary. It was a novel. If I were going to make it again, I would adhere to what the evidence case. Now, what's interesting, when Frank was writing the book, we'd sit down and talk for hours. He would take notes. And he said, "If you had your druthers, what would you have done?" Well, if we'd had complete control of money flowing into a lab, and we would have rebuilt her environment in a controlled environment. We could measure and observe what was going on to see if we could detect something that wasn't visible to the naked eye. Well, I said we would have used image intensifiers, we used holographic laser cameras, we used high-end magnetometers, but we didn't have that privilege because UCLA wouldn't have never allowed that. So the book came out in 1978, and then the movie came out in 1983. Now, what's interesting, we were shooting on in Culver City Studios. And you know what was shooting right across the street from us? Poltergeist.
Yep.
And
wow.
They actually, from what I heard, they did shoot a rape scene with Joe Beth Williams. But they were warned that if it comes out with that, they were going to get sued, so they deleted it. So, it was, it's... Like I said, I didn't like the film because they rewrote Frank's work. Frank was supposed to direct it, and he had directorial acumen, so he knew what he was doing. Oh, they wanted to get a younger guy. And the director, Sid Fury, thought we were all full of shit. He thought we were all crazy. All of us. But what was interesting, about 10 years later, I was in one restaurant in Beverly Hills picking up some food to bring home. So I'm there, and there's Sid Fury. Now, I know he didn't like me. I go up to him, "Hey, Sid, how you doing?" And he starts yelling, and he runs out of the restaurant. And I go, "What's that all about?" So a couple weeks later, I learned that he was going to direct a film that was stolen from me. I don't want to go into it. It's a long, arduous case, but I had one of my colleagues and I we've written a number of scripts. This one, well, anyway, Sid Fury was hired to direct the film. And I said, well, now we know it's not going to be any good. And it wasn't. There's an old adage, criminals supposed to be smart. No, the people who stole our product were stupid. Everyone agreed it was a great story idea, but they turned gold into lead. Reverse alchemy.
Wow.
So,
That's
but
a crazy
it's
case.
yeah, the case is now the house has been renovated and repainted. I don't know what it's been like, but we haven't been there again. That it went with Doris as she moved. Like I said, moved and moved and moved. By the time she came back to L.A. to visit the film, it had all stopped. But she didn't talk much. She was very, very uncooperative in that respect. And what can you do?
That was a great question. Thank you for that. Greg, we're coming up at the end of the hour. Greg, what do you got for us?
I was just gonna hold my questions off until after the break. I go
okay. Yeah, that's right. It just hit the bottom. We're gonna go ahead and take a break, but when we come back from break, I wanna talk about the UFOs and how that connects to some of this phenomenon, and maybe we can pry into the Jackie Hernandez case a little bit too, and anything else you can talk about.
The Jackie Hazard, that was her maiden name.
Yeah, we're going to talk about Miss Jackie. But this is Profiling the Paranormal with Part 2 with Dr. Bre-The Thin Lizzy and his website. Be sure to check his website out, www.barrytaff.net. This is Project Stargate Fringe Research, and we'll be back in just a moment. All right, welcome back to Project Stargate Fringe Research. You're listening to Profiling the Paranormal Part 2 with Dr. Bre-The Thin Lizzy and a special guest co-host, Lizzie Borden, also known as Bree. And thank you all for being with us once more. Thank you very much. And before we went to our break, we were talking about all the different aspects of parapsychology, and you also, Dr. Taff, went into one of your most famous cases. But there's another case that even for me is even more fascinating. It's just remarkable, and that's the San Pedro poltergeist case. What happened?
Well, I got a call in spring of 1989. It was late spring, from a woman. It wasn't Jackie. It was a friend of hers who lived near her. And she said all these strange things are happening. So we go out there, myself, Barry Conrad, one of our assistants, Jeff Wheatcraft, and one other person. So we're out there. It was really hot house. Had the same smell of decomposing organic matter or urine. And she told us about things flying around, about apparitions appearing, and the whole bit. And she was wired. She was just frenetic as you could be. I'm afraid she didn't start spinning and lift off. She was very chaotic state. She's separated from her really terrible husband. She got a couple of kids to take care of. She could barely do that. And she described apparitions and strange lights. And so while we're there the first time, we hear what sounds like a giant rat running around the attic. So we crawl up in the attic. We got this top of the washing machine to do that, and we don't see anything. We come back down, but we're in the attic again, and then Jeff's taking pictures. Something grabs Jeff's camera out of his hands, goes flying across the attic, hits the ground, and it was perfectly set on the ground. The lens was standing up on its own, disconnected from the body, and the body was on its own in a fruit box. But how did that happen, and why? So the case went on for many months. We were there, and so the other time we were there, I was up north. I was in LA because my father had a heart attack, and I had to help my mother. So Barry and Jeff were there, a few other people. And one point, Jeff's in the attic looking because they heard that weird banging noise, and suddenly he's going to come down, and he's up there with another friend of ours, Gary Bame, and before Jeff could even move, something grabbed him, and you hear like he's being strangled, and it's a clothesline tied around his neck in the bowline knot, and he's being pulled up over the rafter by nothing. Had Gary not been there and fired his camera for light to get back there, if it flashed, Jeff would have died. In which case, someone would have been tried. So the case went on and on for many months, and Barry Conrad, who was working with me, recorded some extraordinary phenomena, luminous balls of light, and around Jackie. Some of them going into her head, and these were not visible to the naked eye.
Wow.
Others were on the floor. They almost looked like weird forms of ball lightning. They were too stable. Their extremities were too stable for that. Anyway, she moved up north, way hundreds of miles north, and phenomena followed her, which is not unusual. But at the same time, phenomena kept happening in her old little house on 11th Street in San Pedro. So again, it's the what I call the psychovirus. The phenomena stayed where it was, but somehow it modified Jackie to where she's away from her original home, and she starts manifesting phenomena on her own. And Jeff and Barry were witness to this. It picked up and threw Jeff into the wall like a rag doll and almost died. And it's amazing he didn't. And a whole bunch of things happened. Now Barry Conrad, who was later producer, director, he wrote an extraordinary book called, San Pedro Haunting. So you could find it, Barry Conrad. And then he made a video about the same case, which is also extraordinary. His own time, his own money.
Is that video still available? I'm sorry for cutting.
I have no idea.
Because I've seen it before. It's an incredible video. I mean, seeing Wheatcrit Jeff being hung in that attic. Tell us about the attic. My God, tell us about that.
Yeah, I've seen that video.
Oh, you have?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Years ago, I've seen that video. Yes, that's where
cool.
There's a whole lot of synchronicities around.
Yeah, I was just about to say the same
guest
thing.
And you bringing me on for this one.
I was about to say the same thing. I'm sorry, Dr. Taff.
That's okay.
Interrupting. Go ahead, please.
No, the case is amazing. So she moved, and then she moved up north, and then Barry Conrad, Jeff had followed her. Phenomena started happening there. Unplugged appliances were coming on and off, turning off. Other phenomena, they tried a little seance. That's where Jeff was picked up and thrown in the wall like a rag doll. And then she moved from there back to San Pedro sometime later, and the phenomena stayed with her. So I was with her for some show. I don't even remember. I have to look at my resume a long time. Some talk show on TV or, I don't know, like reality show about events. And so I was trying to explain to the producer that the phenomena around Jackie is not dead people or ghosts. It's the poltergeist case. But it's still happening. Yeah, original house, new people moved in. Knew nothing about the case. They started having phenomena. We go back there with instruments, equipment. It fails in the house. Take it out of the house. Comes back on. So this case is extraordinary, and it was really helpful in clarifying what we believed was happening. It was happening, but more so. So Jackie back in San Pedro, more lights were photographed. Barry gave her some cameras, and he couldn't be there all the time. Took some pictures, and they were amazing. These glowing lights over the carpet, just hanging there. And if you didn't know what it was, you'd think these pictures were UFO related. And so anyway, the case ended a long time ago. So I'm with the producer on this talk. We're doing a shoot, Jackie and myself. So I'm explaining things. So the producer says, so Jackie's telling the ghost what to do, and the ghost is doing it. No, this is not a ghost. It's an extension of Jackie being in that environment, charged up her body. She left it. Phenomena is still bleeding off. It goes away, and it's been long gone. Thankful to Jackie. It's an amazing case. Now, it's interesting. The ARC missed something else. You never try to explain one phenomena with another. That's bad science, and it's not logical. However, there's another field of fringe research that's been going on for a long time that seems to be somewhat directly correlated to the paranormal, and that is ufology. We've had, We've had a number of cases that began as poltergeists and then evolved into a close encounter of the third kind or an abduction, or began as an alleged abduction and then turned into a poltergeist case. Now, before I get into this in more depth, there's been a lot of interest in the media on UFOs since articles in the LA Times and the New York Times were published and things online, but there's nothing new. Most people who are really into ufology know that these things have been tracked at hypersonic speed going back 60 years. What a surprise that they are multimedia devices. They can fly in space, they can fly in the air, and they can go in the water at tremendous speed with a propulsion system we can't even guess at, not using propellers, jets, or rockets. They perform maneuvers that would crush any person aboard and or the vehicle itself.
That's right.
So this has been going on for decades. There's nothing new here. In the summer of 1952, there was a series in successive weekends in July. There were successive flyovers of the capital of 9 UFOs traveling at up to 9,000 miles an hour. They were photographed, picked up by ground radar, air radar, and then the minute we set up jets to chase them, they would just go away. And then they came back, and then go away, and then came back. And there's nothing new under the sun. You know, I have a weird feeling that down the road, none of us alive today may live long enough to see this, but I have a feeling that when the UFO thing is really brought forward with real evidence, not talking, not guesswork, not, oh, it could be this, it could be, real evidence, we're going to learn of reality that are very different than what we think we live in.
Yes.
And if we think we have trouble with different ethnicities on the earth or colors of people on earth, dealing with aliens are going to make us look really stupid. And in history, there's something that's happened that's always turned out poorly. And that is when a very advanced civilization meets a far inferior one, the inferior one is either totally overwhelmed and absorbed by the more advanced one, or they're killed. That's in human history. As far as we know, UFOs are not dangerous. They've never hit airliners. They've never caused anything to crash, but a number of them have supposedly crashed. On a website, there's a number of articles that deal with this, but the one that's most relevant is it's called what's it called? Anatomy of an EBE. You'll see it's a discussion of real autopsies of dead aliens. It's a great article because it references some really good work put forth by the late Leonard Stringfield. And another person who knows of this, who speaks of this superbly, is Richard Dolan. Probably the most articulate, intelligent ufologist out there right now. The only man that equaled him, I thought, was, he died last year, a good friend of mine. I can't remember his name. I'm getting terrible with age. Stanton Friedman, great guy, very intelligent, wise, funny, witty. It was sad when he passed away. He was really a good person. I met him in 1969. He was a wonderful person. And it would have been great to work with him, but yeah, what can you do? But the whole thing, see, what's interesting is, let's start with the most common thing is when people claim to be abducted. We can't prove it, we can't disprove it. So something really odd happens to them, and then it stops, and then they start having paranormal fallout. Suddenly they're telepathic, they're precognitive, they're able to heal themselves or others, something like that. And then it eventually fades. And the question is, were they really abducted, or is it something else? Well, we can't prove that. But other than the equation is people that starts with poltergeist cases and evolves into a CE4. That is an abduction. I've had several of those cases. They're on my website, the most significant of which altered my life in a very negative way. On February 14th, Valentine's Day of 1977, my colleague and I, Carrie Gaynor, went out, well, what could you do? Went out to a case in LA. Wait, let me it's getting really warm here. 1 second. Let me just gonna put up the air. It's getting too warm.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just get away from screw up the phone here. Let's see here. Okay.
You good?
Yeah, I just had to go around to the side of the room. So, met this girl. We walked in there. I already talked to the girl, to the woman, a couple times. We walked in the room, and for the first time in my life, I was left speechless. not before phenomena, but to me, this was the most beautiful girl I'd ever seen. She sort of looked like, very much like Liz Taylor with darker eyes. Very similar features, facial physiognomy, her body, her height, everything. I mean, there's so much like her. Just amazing. So, long story short, we kept talking. She was living with her ex-boyfriend. She moved out, lived with a friend, and we started dating. Everything was great. It was almost perfect. And it was like two peas in a pod for me, which is unusual because most women either become frightened of me or they think I'm crazy or they make me look normal, which is not good. So we're dating, and then everything was perfect. I mean, everything. Intellectual, emotional, sexual. It's just unbelievable. She started participating in our site training groups at UCLA and with good results. She was very responsive in terms of reacting to the learning paradigm we were setting up in our research.
So okay. Is that fair to say she was adept?
She was able to access information remotely quite easily. The full breadth of it, I don't know, because I only knew her for several months. So what happened was that we were seeing each other. It was great. Suddenly the dreams started, and the dreams were always the same. The dreams were that it was something about July 22nd, and something happened that broke us up, but I didn't know what. And I'm not going to tell her. She'll misinterpret that as that I do want to end the relationship, which I don't want to do, or didn't want to do. So I didn't say anything. And then the dreams kept coming, always the same. No specificity with regarding the cause of the breakup. Well, I just wrote down what I learned and nothing. So going, and dreams keep coming, not every night, but enough where it's worrisome. And they're unnerving as hell. So I didn't tell her. And then on the morning of July 20, we were staying together in her mother's condo for a while. And she liked it better than my place. Anyway, it doesn't matter. So in the same bed, wake up together. I wake up, and she's under the cover. She's sobbing. And I said, "What's the matter?" And she said, "Why didn't you help me last night?" I go, "With what?" When the room lit up. What room? The bedroom. What are you talking about? She said she was lifted up out of bed, moved horizontally out of the room somehow. Didn't remember going through a door. And then she was in a metal room. Looked like stainless steel or brushed aluminum. And on a metal table, she was restraining her ankles, her abdomen, her neck, and her wrists. And there was little guys around her. Grayish reptilian type skin, big black eyes angled upwards, but to the side, and they had no nose. She could hear them, but they weren't speaking. Classic abduction. They were cutting hair off her. They were taking chunks of cells out of her back, and they were putting probes into her bodily orifices. Now she's telling me this, and I said to her, "Do you know anything about UFO abduction?" She goes, "What?" She had no interest in UFOs at all. Zero. She goes, "What are you talking?" I told her, she said, "Don't hear it. It's crap. I don't want to hear about it." Okay. So, took about 90 minutes to get her out of the covers. Her eyes are red and swollen from sobbing. And that wasn't the real problem. The problem was she had black and blue bruises around her ankles, her abdomen, and her neck, and her wrists. Like she'd been held too tightly for too long. She was bleeding from her nose, bleeding from one of her eyes, bleeding from one of her ears, bleeding from her rectum, bleeding from her uterus, but she wasn't menstruating. Her hair was cut in a weird way, and her back looked like someone took a metal baller and took chunks of skin out of her.
Damn.
So this was before there were any groups or psychologists or psychiatrists that dealt with this, and the people thought it was garbage. And she said, "But why didn't you help me?" I go, "I was sound asleep, but you should have woken up." I said, "Well, they don't give you that privilege. If they want person one as opposed to person two, they take person one, but they turn off person two, so there's no problems." Anyway, so she had a breakdown, and she became quite disturbed, a strange religious zealot. She was raised Catholic, I believe, I think, and she started to worship some weird avatar in another part of the world. Okay, so that ended our relationship, but it happened on July 22nd. So, and then I was walking down to my car that afternoon from the condo in the Hollywood Hills. I met a guy who lived across the street from where we were staying. She said to me, "Did you see that last night?" I go, "See what?" There was this big thing hovering around over us here. I don't know, it looked like a house. It was kind of flattened. It was like orangish red, and it turned the power off for a couple hours. Yep,
Dang.
there were 2 hours. Did that prove she was abducted? No. Does it disprove it? No. And she's a complete basket case now, completely out of her mind. And, so, okay, now we go to another case, began in 81 or 2. It was an executive at CBS television, and we can't use names, called there was weird stuff happening in their house. So I go out and meet them, interview them, low-level case. We can't do much with it because stuff happens very irregularly. Doesn't make any sense in terms of them. So, and then sometime later, months later, they call me. They were taking a trip up north, driving in their new car, and they saw it looked like a plane about to crash into the valley to their right. They drove through the canyon, got into where they thought it crashed. They come around the corner. Yeah, something was on the ground, but it wasn't a plane, and it didn't crash. It was a disc, and landed, and there were these little humanoids doing things with the ground, and like grabbing things. And they suddenly look at them in their car, and the last thing they remembered was one of the beings holding a tube of sort that emitted light, and that's it. Suddenly they're in their car again. It's hours later, and they're driving north. So couldn't prove anything, couldn't disprove it, but their stories pretty much paralleled, and it traumatized, and it got so bad that they divorced because they couldn't deal with the stress. It was tearing them apart, and they were too embarrassed to go see a psychiatrist about this. But and he lost his one job, then another job, because he became so irritable and anxiety-ridden because of all that he couldn't function. So those are two of the more interesting cases. But there have been many. There was another one from the early 80s, in Sunland or somewhere in the north edge of San Fernando Valley, northeast end. So I go out to the house. A nice Hispanic woman with a son who wasn't there, and divorced. A beautiful home, really beautiful. Very nice. She talks about weird things happening in the house. Like what? Well, these strange gray things are moving around quickly, and the power goes out and off, and shakes the bed, blah blah blah. But it's not an earthquake, and things turn on and off, and they find dishes piled up in the sink when there was nothing there minutes earlier.
Wow.
And then,
raiding the fridge.
Yeah. So then I said to her, when did this all begin? How did it start? Oh, I was taking a walk behind the house in the little valley there, canyon, and I turned into the canyon. There was this thing on the ground, and it was circular, and it was big. I was hit by light, and suddenly I woke up back in the house.
Wow.
That's how it began. So things got worse, but we couldn't be there that often. So then a couple months later, I get a call from her son, who was like 19 or 20 years old, maybe more. And he said, "My mom's missing." And what do you mean? Well, she's gone. Is her car gone? No. Go up to the house. She's missing. Her purse is there. Her keys are there. Her money and credit cards are there, but she's not. One of the things she described earlier in the case were these giant balls of fire coming down from the canyon and slamming into the house over and over again.
Wow.
So, it's, and one more case, it's in my book, about a girl from, about 83. She was a student at UCLA, got hold of me, go out there, and she just said one night she woke up and there were these two weird creatures next to her pulling something out of her arm, like something surgical. And she started screaming, and the dog came in there and started barking, growling at them. And then the mother came in and saw them, and they said that they touched something on their chest or abdomen, and they lit up and they were gone. So I said, well, who knows what it is, but don't worry, I don't know. A couple of months later, boom, happens again. She wakes up, the creatures are there. But now she had an aquarium where she kept a snake. And they were really interested in the snake. And they looked at her father and mother come in, and she starts screaming, and they start screaming. The dog comes in and growls and barks. And then they disappear again. And then the girl got so freaked out by this, she put her clothes in her car and disappeared.
You've had some experiences yourself, right?
Well, I talked about the girl from 1977, that evidence subject. She was abducted. However, I've seen in 1982 or 3, I was driving my Trans Am home from a friend's house in Palms area in West LA, and I saw it looked like a plane about to crash into the Ralph A. Navon's market there. So I get out, and it's not a plane. There's no wings, no fuselage. It's a disc. No, not a disc. It was like a large cigar, but it had weird shape to it. And there was no power to it. There was no prop noise. There was no jet. And it was just slowly moving and turning on a lateral plane. There were bright lights coming out, like arc welders lights coming out the sides of it. Then it started to move away, and I couldn't follow it because you can't take a straight path, on the ground, because there's buildings and streets and people. And this was about 1 a.m. in the morning. And so a couple of days later, my parents called me, and they said, we saw the weirdest thing the other night. It looked like a weird machine in the air, but it didn't have any wings or tail. They described what I saw. So, and then I was visiting a friend in Mar Vista, part of West LA, and it was called. Anyway, I'm waiting for her. She didn't come to the switch yet to let me in. Looked to my right, it was about 8 o'clock at night, and I saw this weird disc hovering and then changing colors. Then it was gone. Well, now why is there a connection between UFOs and the paranormal? Because my guess is they may use forces that we call paranormal. In other words, this is how the function they work in. And if they can manipulate space-time, and they can do interstellar travel in real time, they're one of the things Arthur C. Clarke said a long time ago, that sufficiently advanced civilization's technology would be like magic to us. And that's what it appears to be. That, we have machines, but nothing can do what these things do. And so, in the end, what does it mean? It means, well, there's a lot more to learn. And I don't think anyone is the stuff coming out now is entertainment. Different shows, it's entertainment. And, there were a couple shows, I don't remember the name of them. I watched them. I was like, tell us something new. Stop regurgitating what's been going on for 80 years. There's no discussion of the event. There were a lot of UFO activities in Vietnam. A lot.
Yeah, there was. And, I heard about a case, actually, where a platoon of soldiers ran across what appeared to be some non-human entities collecting body parts off the battlefield.
Exactly. Yeah, I read that in Richard Leonard Stringfield's, one of his books. And there was a firefight that developed, and they fired at we fired back. It could have only had to be a headshot. If you shot their body like a silver-covered suit, nothing would happen. This was in Cambodia, I believe.
Yeah, also, the green fog. There's, I spoke to a few vets about a fog that's green, and they could hear screams and weird sounds, metallic sounds coming out of the fog. There was a lot that went on over there, a whole lot that went on.
Yeah. They were shooting at the, we were shooting at these, whatever the glowing things were, and they heard clank like it hit armor or metal, and then sometimes they'd fire back and the boats would just burst into flame.
Dang.
So,
wow.
It's question is, why were they there and what were they doing? And there were UFOs seen in World War II and the Korean War. I mean, there's evidence that indicates that UFOs, perhaps similar and maybe dissimilar from, been around since biblical times. They've been spotted and described. And, the question is, why and what?
I want to relay a personal experience that relates to what you're talking about, Dr. Taff, if you don't mind.
Sure.
But Greg was an eyewitness to this, and he can attest to some of this story. It was what summer was that, Greg, that we had that UFO encounter together? What summer was it? Do you remember? What?
I think it's either 2015 or 2016.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about accurate. But anyway, it was one summer there, and there was about 2 months. Almost every night I would walk across. I was just out of I got divorced just previous to this, so I was kind of staying with my mom and dad for a little while. And across the street from their house, there's this lake and a gazebo, and there's a walking path. And almost every single night for about 2 months, this object would manifest, probably on the horizon. Maybe I estimated it was probably not far away, about a mile maybe, or within a mile. And this object would seemingly manifest, and then it would just blink in, and sometimes it would reappear at another part of the further away or another area of space. Well, one night, I said, Greg and I used to work together at one of the mega retailers, and we were closing our department one night, and I said, Greg, I think you remember that we were talking about this a little while ago. But I remember I told you about what was happening. Did you think I was making it up? Did you think I was full of crap, or what's up? What were you thinking before I actually took you back?
Well, you know what? I'm a never say never type guy, so I was very interested in seeing that for myself and to make my own conclusions. And seeing that for the first time, it was a bit bizarre, but I don't take everything at face value. So, and in my experience with the paranormal, there's probably like 1,000 different ideas as to what it could have been, but seeing that was a bit odd.
Because we saw that object it would manifest, and then the night before, it was followed. We had two F-16 interceptors flying into the airspace, so they were looking for something. But anyway, when Greg left, we saw this object. I showed it. He saw it with his own eyes, and he can definitely attest to that. And he left. We talked about it for a little while, and he left because it was getting really late. And when I walked up into where I was living in my room, I was walking into my room, and across the hall from my room there was a bathroom, like a powder room or something, and the door was open. My dad was sleeping in the room next to mine, and his door was closed. He was sound asleep. So as I was walking into the room, Dr. Taff, that door slammed shut really hard, like the force. It sounded like a really strong individual just took that door and kicked it shut. And this was immediately following a close encounter of the first or second kind.
Yeah.
So I just want to relay that story to all of you real quick.
The people kind of tend to ignore a lot of this unless it happens to them, and they don't understand it. And again, there's a connection between, the first person to write about this was Jacques Vallée decades ago. But another example, we moved to, a friend and I were living in, as I said, rental garage, and then we moved to Palm Desert. So the weird things happening. But it got stranger and stranger. Luminous anomalies, I've talked about this before. However, I'm taking the garbage out one night. I'm taking it out, and my friend isn't even home. And I took the last garbage to the bins outside of the house. And I'm walking, and suddenly there's a flash of light to my right, and probably a couple 100 feet over where I'm at, there's a discovery in there. It was like an orangish color. I went, whoa. And look at the hell. What's that? Then, poof, gone. Okay, weeks later, I'm out there, and there's a weird cluster of lights that don't make sense. They're anomalous motion. They're not aircraft because they're not moving in a way that regular aircraft would. So I have a really strong laser in a Star Trek phaser that's illegal. It's like 30 watts. And I fired it up in the direction of the lights, and suddenly they were pulsing back in a really odd manner. And I pulsed back, they pulsed back, and then they were gone. Okay. So months later, I'm asleep in my bedroom. I was in one end of the house. My friend's bedroom was in the other. And I wake up, and there's something or someone in my room. It wasn't me. It wasn't my friend. And they're pulling something out from the underside of my right arm. What? And I jump, and I look, and they're not people. They're like grays, humanoids. And they're bouncing off each other, and they turn around and go right through my desk and the wall. They were gone. So it smelled. It was a horrible smell of what did it smell like? Ammonia. Very strong ammonia sound.
The smell I smelt was like a cross between ammonia and sulfur. It's just really hard to describe.
Yeah. So I cleaned up the underside of my arm, and that was that. Now, a little before that, months later before that, I wake up again at 3 a.m. and my head, my right side of my face is presumably on a pillow, except that it wasn't the pillow. I wake up and what? And even though there was no light in my room, there was enough light coming in from outside where I could see. And the reason what I was laying on, my face was so soft, it wasn't a pillow. It was a woman's left breast. And I go, huh? And I see dark colored hair, auburn hair, high brow ridge, thin nose, can't see the eyes, can't really see the mouth. Very long hair down below the buttocks. And I go, what? It's a woman. And I see breast. What the hell? What? And then I go to turn the light on and hear a woman's voice, don't turn the light, turn the light. I go, what the? I turn it on. There was nothing there. But in order to turn the light on, I had to reach over her body. So light comes on, and the bed has a lot of very long auburn hair in it that didn't belong to me. Now, what made this case interesting was a year later, around July 5th of 2020, this old girlfriend gets hold of me. We used to live together in Brentwood, where stuff happened when we were together. But anyway, so she called, we talked. She had been married and divorced, no surprise there. So she said to me, well, the reason I called you is something happened with me related to you, and I want to know what's going on. I said, tell me. She described what happened when she was in my bed.
Wow.
Okay. Does it prove that? No, bilocation, doppelganger, whatever you want to call it. Now, what's interesting is, we couldn't prove what happened, but it was a little odd when she described what I experienced. She's gotten really strange with age, or smoking too much weed, a little too much hallucinogen in her body. So, okay, weird stuff happens like this. We lived together in Brentwood, and one other point to show you how strange I am, we started generically talking about marriage, not literally, but what if? She wanted to get married in the church. Okay, well, whatever. And I went, what about you? I said, I want to get married on the bridge of the Enterprise. And she went, you're a naval commander? No, not that Enterprise. I went, Starship. She goes, the what? He had no interest in Star Trek. Yeah, I said, I want to get married. We're on this bridge, the bridge set from the original series. And all the guests are dressed normally, but all the guests are wearing Star Trek uniforms. But my bride and I are wearing Star Trek uniforms. The other guests, we're dressed like normal wedding people. The guests are in uniform. We start performing the ceremony, and suddenly we're attacked by a Romulan battlecruiser. We got to we attack it, destroy it. Are you kidding? I said, no. You would do that? I said, sure. Are you crazy? No, it sounds interesting. And of course, we didn't. But I told her 2 months later, I said, you're having an affair, aren't you? I described the guy, described his car and what he did. Are you following me? Nope. How do you know? How do I do anything? It's relevant to me. And it didn't work. And I said, well, you're not angry? No, I'm disappointed. I thought we got along well together. And now that she's crazy as a loon, now she's 10 years younger than me. But I saw current photos of me, and she doesn't even look like the person I knew. A long time ago, she was dating some guy, and she wanted to know she wasn't ovulating, if she could take these injections of hormones to make her hot for ovulate. I go, no, don't do it. Don't do it. Your body will have a toxic reaction. She did it anyway, and all of her hair fell out.
Oh my gosh.
So I said, yeah, free advice is worth every penny, right? And so I warned her she had listened to me. And then before I left LA, or even she didn't know I was leaving, I gave her a reading on the boyfriend she ended up marrying. I said, be careful of this guy. He's a gigolo. He's going to rob you blind. And what did she tell me? That he stole $300,000 from her.
Oh,
I said, so you didn't really adhere to what I told you? I listened, no. Well, I told her, you're so disturbed if I put you in the largest coliseum in the world, the sports coliseum, all filled with men that look the same. They all have the same makeup on. You would find Hitler and want to date him. I said, what the hell's wrong with you? So, a long time ago, when we were together, I mean, some issue things happened. And it looked really intriguing, but the problem was she was so disturbed that it wasn't going to work. But, and beyond that, I think anything else happened. We were sitting in a restaurant once in Westwood. I forgot it was really beautiful, long gone by now. And we're eating dinner, well-lit restaurant. But looking at each other, and suddenly I saw her face change into someone I didn't recognize. At the same moment, she saw my face change into someone she didn't recognize. So the question is, what did we experience? I don't know.
Let's get some Q&A in. Bre, kick it off.
Okay. One thing in common with paranormal and UFOs I've found in common are that they can delete evidence if they want, because my mom had caught a UFO. We went to a UFO watchtower here in Colorado, and my mom was just taking a picture outside her car window, not paying attention. And then so her looking at it, I hear her in the back seat say, that's a UFO. And so I see it, and my brother sees it. And I don't know why I didn't tell her to, text me that evidence, but she later on looked for it on her phone and it disappeared. And she claims, or she swears, she did not delete it. And so I know people, friends that catch UFO evidence, sometimes stuff deletes itself. So that's something that they have in common as well. That if they don't want you seeing it, if they don't want it getting out, it won't get out.
I've heard of some things like that, but I've heard more things in common where, like, before the Apollo missions, we were setting orbiters to the moon and photographing, and when the Apollo program, they took some extraordinary photos showing things that shouldn't have been on the moon. They were completely whitewashed, or not whitewashed, what do you call it?
Airbrushed.
You can redo airbrushed out.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, they don't want you to see it, so it's gone. But see, all of this is related to a common thread. Another story. So in 1970, I met this gorgeous girl in classes in college. Her name was Sharon. She looked like, I'm terrible with names, really attractive. So we were going fun, we're dating, and she lived in Northridge, I lived in West LA, and the distance was irrelevant because gas was 35 cents a gallon, so who cares? So dating, and then the dreams began. When the recurring dreams, they're warning. They were always the same. I'm in the back seat of a car. I can't see the driver, but he's got thick, dark hair, which is what I had. I see Sharon in the passenger seat. And suddenly a large car flies out of nowhere and slams into us broad like a T-bone. And the driver is almost torn apart, and she's laying there bloody and broken. And I couldn't see the dashboard of the car, so I didn't know if it was my car, but I said, well, it must be because she's in the passenger seat. So I told her about the dream, and she goes, "What? I don't think it's good for us to keep dating. Why? Because we're going to die. Oh, it won't help us." But I go, "But I can't do this because I can't run the risk of this will hurt you and me. I can't do it." And she thought I was crazy. No, yeah, that's fine. So we broke. I didn't blame her. I might have been the same. And sometime months later, she met someone else. They're dating. They're coming home to her place in Northridge, little cul-de-sac. Turns in, he had a smaller car. A large car comes out, slams into them. He's killed. She's badly injured. Didn't change a thing. My ego put me in the driver's seat because I said, well, she's there. That must be me. Did I change the future, or was my knowledge of it what prevented me from being in it? You know, this is the whole problem with the field. There are no hard answers. You know, imagine this is in the early 70s. Dreams of my flying a 747. It ran out of power. Engine started to fail, and we hit the ground. It was South Africa, and I wake up and I'm sweating. I'm shaking. The next day, I checked to see if any 747s had crashed. They were really new in service and have a perfect record. So all I knew was CWA, and it was approaching South Africa. Gee, a few days later, it happened. Now, if that happened today and I called the FAA or Homeland Security before it happened, they would arrest me.
Yeah.
They would say, well, if you know what's going to happen, you must have been involved with creating the event. No, I saw the event before it happened. You know, and this all comes down to, however we describe events, it's part of the human condition. This is all about who we are, what we are, how far we extend beyond our physical boundaries. That we're beyond our toes and nose and eyes and hands. And some people won't even touch this stuff. Others, like me, and maybe you guys, we're into it because we realize once you get rid of the BS and the misinformation, the disinformation, there's something extraordinary going on. And this is why some people get into the field for answers. You know, why me? Why aren't my friends and family? Why weren't they? I don't have any brothers and sisters. I have cousins, and they always stayed away from me. They were terrified. And it was crazy. And every time I've been on TV years ago, my parents were embarrassed because their friends would call them and see me on TV talking about the paranormal, and they thought I was crazy. So, you live and you learn. This stuff is good.
I was just gonna. I'm sorry. We're coming up on the bottom of the hour of our last segment. I wanted to make sure that she and Greg gets to get to theirs. You're up. She.
I'll pass because I'm more interested in hearing what Greg's questions were from the last hour. So.
Okay.
I want to hear everyone's questions.
Okay, well, Greg, go ahead. I'll let you go ahead, and then I've got something I want to add to this. I want to add to this myself.
Okay. Well, I had a question on behalf of a coworker who's also a big fan of the podcast. For Dr. Taff, with your experience with supernatural, would you say that the idea of anything demonic related is very, very, very rare, or is it just as prevalent as, say, with a disembodied spirit?
Well, first of all, if you really study the origins of the word demon, you might be surprised. It's not what people think it was or is. The word is the way the church described people that left God and wouldn't follow the ways of the church. They were demonic. It had nothing to do with entities or monsters or creatures. That's the way the word evolved. So there's phenomena. It's an extension of the human psyche. There's good, there's bad, there's in the middle. Just like in nature, there are things that are great, productive, and reinforcing, and yet there are things that are very dangerous that can hurt or not kill you. But if a plane blows up while you're on it, God forbid, a demon may grow up. Something failed or broke on the plane. Saying things are demonic is like, well, I give up. It's got to be what it is. if you study this field long enough and do enough reading, the biggest problem this field faces the lack of education. Before one can begin to really understand what's dealing with paranormal, they have to gain some knowledge about how the physical world works. That is biology and chemistry, maybe some engineering, electronics, and then you realize the detail and what's required to comprehend a lot of this stuff. It's real, it's paranormal, but it's a lot different than we thought it was. This is what I said in opening, that everything I've learned amazed me because it was no one even talked about it. So, demon this, demon that, it just, that's us projecting our concerns and worries into something we don't understand. And just like the rest of nature, there are good things that happen, and there are bad things that happen. So, that's how it works.
Wow, that was a good question, Greg. Did you have anything, and did you have anything else, brother?
Nope, we're good.
Oh, so in your career, and I'm going to kind of bring it to a close here, just a few minutes. I really appreciate your time, Dr. Taff, and you, Bre. I really appreciate you being with us as well. Thank you. Thank you both. Of course. But it seems to me there's some circumstances where they're like that. Certainly, a lot of circumstances I've looked into, and some of which I've experienced, do seem to fall within the category within the frame that you're describing, and that's what was so interesting to me about your book. When I initially read it, I was floored by a lot of the information you put in there, because I remember saying to myself, my God, this is the same stuff I've experienced. But sometimes there does seem to be some kind of intelligence at work. Do you think it's possible that there is some kind of disembodied alien intelligence of some kind at work in some cases?
All I can tell you is this. Consciousness, the energy associated with it, regarding living human brains is far more than we imagine. We don't end with the tip of our nose or the tip of our toes. We exist in a realm well beyond the physical, and all that means is that we have to study it to help improve the human condition. So, are there disembodied spirits running around? Maybe, I don't know, but in my 53 years of work, the majority of it turned out to be poltergeist activity, recurrent spontaneous psychokinesis. And if you go in the environment, you measure the environment, you ask the people present and about their medical backgrounds, take measurements of them, you invariably come up with the same evidence. And everyone is different. Every case is different, but it has commonality in terms of those who were present when it occurs. And that's what you have to look for. Start asking questions. Ask their health medical background, what medications are on, what their family history was medically. All of this plays into it. And in one of my articles on my website called Poltergeist Case to Remember, it involves my colleague Barry Conrad and his now deceased girlfriend Lisa McIntosh. Detailed information, logs were kept on these amazing events. And lo and behold, they correlated 100% with her health. When she was healthy, it was like a machine gun. Boom, 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 things happening. She got really sick, relapsed. It stopped. She go back into remission. Boom, 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 boom. She got relapsed. Stop. So it was obvious this stuff's an extension of her psyche. She's gone. The phenomenon stopped. But there's a strange symbiosis between us and the environments in which we live that we don't understand. Is that discarnate? I don't know. Is that disembodied? I don't know. But I do know that we're part of it. And we in some way can mediate it. And if we study it correctly and take our time, we may find something that redefines life as we know it.
And that's the end game, right, for parapsychology, right?
Exactly.
Because if we could master what the type of energy that drives PK, I mean, that would alter the course of mankind forever. I mean, that'd be a huge game changer.
When you see a 200-pound man picked up and thrown across the room like you weighed a microgram.
Yeah.
That's astounding. But even more astounding is, in our world, that type of work would produce heat as a byproduct. Yet there's no heat. It's usually cold. Instead of exothermic, it's endothermic.
Mm-hmm.
It challenges our concepts of reality.
Right.
And then big question, what about this? What about that? It's an energy we don't understand. Call it 0 point. Call it whatever you want. But we're somehow linked to it.
Unlimited free energy. Imagine that.
Yeah. Beyond nuclear, beyond hydroelectric, beyond anything we know of.
Yeah.
You could power starships with this.
We could all be energy independent. Every country, energy independent.
Exactly.
And no worries.
Exactly. Yep. It seems a little too good to be true.
So the closest I've come to that, where it's like I do have sometimes technology, especially if my moods, like if I'm very upset, I've noticed that my laptop will miraculously malfunction right then when I'm using the program all the time and I don't have issues. So that's the only thing that like I can like relate of just your own emotion and everything and it affecting what is nearby.
Right. Yeah, it's the same reason I can't wear a watch. The same reason I have a desktop computer. If I had a notebook or laptop, I would have gone through them every couple of months. So don't do it. So I didn't, Who cares why it's happening at this point? The fact that it is, you can't keep spending more money to do the same thing. So, I know, like, I've gone through many cell phones. I've had Tag Heuer watches. My last one, I loved it. Rolex before that. And they all end up becoming magnetized and will refuse to work. Batteries last days to weeks. It's horrible.
We got 5 minutes. You got a new book in the works? Can you what can you say about it at this point?
I can't tell you anyone the title because it would probably get grabbed and published before I do mine. But this delves more into what got me into this and the continuing or ongoing experiences, many of which I have not discussed publicly. And if you look at, bottom line with this, when I was working at UCLA decades ago, all the academicians I was dealing with were around my parents' age, well, a little younger, but basically their age. To a person, man, woman, tall, short, thin, fat, all of them thought I was an alien. I went, what? Ever met an alien? No. No, I know what they're like. Or they're like you. That's part of the problem. This is the reaction I got from academics.
I've been called
they
worse.
Were terrified. But the whole what I'm saying is, if they look at something that's really different and unique in a good way, they think it's frightening and they want to stay away from you. So this is the thing. If you become superhuman tomorrow, got to be careful because if you go too far, you're going to get slapped back even harder.
It's like that movie Chronicles. Has anybody ever seen that movie Chronicles? It's about these boys that these teenage boys who discover that something crashed to Earth, and they find, and when there's nothing inside of it but some kind of glowing matter, and when they get close to it, they start developing intense PK abilities, just remarkable on the dial abilities. Great movie. I recommend it to everybody. But
how long ago did it come out?
Gosh. Back in
last decade, you think?
Yeah, late last decade, early this decade.
And what's it called again?
Chronicle. I'll send you a link. I'll send you a link to it or something. Okay.
Okay. Sounds great.
Well, I tell you what, man, it's really been awesome to have you back up. Whenever you get that book finished, maybe you can come back and hang out with us again, and we can talk all about it.
Yeah, certainly, be great.
I'll be the first kid on my block to get it, so you can count on that. Definitely. And Bre, thank you so much for spending your precious time with us. Thank you very much. And I enjoyed being with all of you, She and Greg. Thank you for being with us. And if you enjoyed this video, please hit the like and subscribe button. That would help us out a whole lot. Also, Bre, I think, Bre, you're going to put this on your channel maybe also?
Yeah, we'll see.
Okay. All right. But anyway, thank you very much for being with us, Dr. Taff. It's been a real privilege to have you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for all you.
All right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Right.
Thank
You're
you.
listening to Project Stargate's Friends Research. I'm your host, Mark Brenner. Thank you for being with us.